Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Totally Baseless. I am Chris Vitali, and football season is over. Pitchers and catchers have reported, so in the immortal words of Vince Scully, it's time for baseball. I'm very, very happy to have my guest today. You may know him from his 15 years of Major League Baseball and 4 World Series championships with the Yankees. You may know him as an analyst for the Yankees and Marlins. And last week, he was on the call of the Caribbean World Series. Jeff Nelson's with us today. Jeff, how are you, man? How you doing?
I'm great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, I'm not digging out of snow up here, but that's one good thing about California, I guess. But so how is it up there, by the way? I've seen some photos. It seems like you guys are getting hit.
Yeah. They said it was the first time in 2 years that it's ever snowed like this. Last year was hardly anything in the city. This year they got, I think they're saying about 8 inches, but it's rapidly melting fast. And it's really nice and beautiful when it snows in New York City. And then in about an hour or two after it stops, it's probably the grossest thing ever because it's like dirty and there's slush and water everywhere.
Yeah, and walking around in that is something I don't miss either.
Yeah,
especially if like a bus goes by and oof, good Lord. But
oh yeah, you're done.
Oh yeah, forget it. You need about 3 umbrellas sideways to stay dry. But one thing I wanted to ask you was you were just down in Miami for the Caribbean World Series. And in the final game, you said something that really, it almost made me stand up in my office chair and start doing a slow clap because I couldn't agree with it more. You said, I will never call it a sweeper. I'll say slurve, but I won't call it a sweeper. So I've spoken to a lot of pitchers about is the sweeper a real thing? Is it just an arm slot thing? Some guys say it's more diagonal movement, but I want to know your take on it once and for all because you had one of the most devastating sliders I've ever seen. So what is this so-called sweeper nonsense?
You know, I thought when they first came out with this, and I thought it was just, hey, let's just call a slider a new pitch. We'll just say it's a sweeper because it's sweeping across the zone. So that's a good idea. We'll do that. I don't know. They have some, obviously, with all the technology now, they have all these ways to measure spin rates. So they think, oh, the spin rate of this pitch is more like it's sweeping across the zone. But it's so inconsistent because I hear people they'll call one guy's pitch a sweeper, and then the next pitcher has the same exact pitch and say, oh no, that's not a sweeper, that's a slider. So for one, I'll never call it a sweeper. Now I would more call it a slurve only because, you know, if you look at a slider's velocity, usually if a guy's throwing about 90 91 miles an hour, slider's probably 85, right? And yeah, curveball's in the 70s. The slurve is probably 80 81. So you know, I don't get why they call it a sweeper. I'll never call it a sweeper because if they're going to, you know, my pitch that I threw was probably way more than a sweeper than what it is now. Yeah. And all of a sudden, oh no, this is the new pitch. I mean, like, how is it the new pitch? They've been throwing this thing for years, way before I even started throwing it. So, you know, maybe way back when baseball first started, they started throwing breaking balls. So, no, I think it's more like, oh, let's just start changing the name of different pitches now.
Yes, it's a little bit of reinventing the wheel for.
Exactly, they've been trying to do for the last few years anyway, with all the rule changes and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had read somewhere it just looked like a normal 12-6 curveball, but apparently they're trying to call it a death ball or something now. I don't know if you've seen this, but that's the newest one for this year. So kind of like that Greg Olson 12-6, you know, like
yeah, it's why. Yeah, exactly. He had a devastating curveball. I mean, okay, just leave it at the same. You know, if you're trying to reach a certain demographic and start making up different names for different pitches, it's not going to work. You know, these guys don't care what you call it. It's a curveball, it's a slider, it's a changeup, it's a fastball. You want, you know, and even over the last few years when he started saying a 2-seam fastball and a 4-seam fastball, I'm like, okay, it's still a fastball. You know, if they break it up in different percentages, oh, so it's still a fastball. You know, if you're throwing 95, your sinker might be 94. It's still a fastball. You don't need to break it up saying, oh, he's only throwing a certain amount of pitches, a certain number of percentage points. It just doesn't make sense.
I'm with you 100%. It's actually funny. I went to go see the Yankees play out in Anaheim last season, and now they put the pitch type on the Tron and everything, and
Right.
everything was sweeper, 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 sweeper,
Yes.
sinker, sweeper, 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 slider. All of a sudden, they differentiated it with a slider. So it makes no
Yeah,
sense
just
to
to
me.
confuse
But
everyone.
yeah, and if it makes no sense to me, who I was a catcher nowhere near. I never sniffed the big leagues or anything. And but if
Did
that
you
can
see the one that they called? I forget where it was. They called it a slutter.
yes, yes,
I'm like, what is that?
yeah, the cross between a slider and a cutter, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck is that? And it was actually up on the board. I'm like, oh, that's something new.
Really? Oh, I've never seen them actually put it up there.
Yeah, I think it might even have been in Miami, and I'm like, oh, slutter. What is that?
Well, I mean, it is Miami, but that's
Yeah, it has nothing to do with baseball, but
well, it's it's a family show. But yeah, it's this
yeah.
slutter. I found that one pretty damn interesting myself. Okay, so talking about the cutter, I actually, obviously you had that devastating slider that we all know. Now, you shared a bullpen for years with Mariano Rivera, and a friend of mine pitched for the Yankees. I think it was in '04. He was in the pen. I think you were in Texas or in Seattle that year. He
Yes.
came,
Hmm.
yeah, he came in for the 1 year, and I asked him, and he's a lefty, so it's a little different. But I did ask him, and I like to ask anybody that ever pitched with Mariano, did you ever try to learn it? And what he said to me was, I did try, and it just didn't work that well. But it's because of Mariano's mechanics and how he was just built, his frame, and just the way he repeated his mechanics that made that pitch just so incredibly difficult to hit. And and so is that a thing? I mean, so with your slider, you don't see a lot of guys with that much movement on their pitch. Is that just natural mechanics, and or is that something that can be taught in a pitch lab and in shaping your pitches?
I think Mariano's four seamer was just an offset. He just offsetted a four seam fastball, and it wasn't. He really didn't break his wrist a whole lot. Like guys would when you're throwing a cutter. A lot of times when you're throwing a cutter, you're throwing it. When you release it, you're releasing it like a football. You're not really snapping your wrist.
Yeah,
You just and you really have to get extended. You can't cut a slider off. I mean, a cutter off because if you short arm a cutter, then it's going to do nothing. It just spins up there, and it's a
sure.
BP fastball. Now, everybody, you can teach mechanically. Someone could have the same mechanics. So you could teach them the same leg kick, same everything, but a release point. I think everyone has a different release point where they release the ball, and how they release the ball. For me, I was able to hold it a certain way. I took a two seam fastball and I just moved it to the side. And I put my middle finger along a big seam, like a two seam, right along the two seams
Yeah,
of the two seam fastball, and I just really released it really hard and snapped it as hard as I could. And I think because of my release point, it became, and my arm angle was a big different, big help as well when I'm throwing three quarters
yeah,
and not over top. So that really helped the movement of the fastball and the movement of the big slider. With Mariano, it was the same way. He had such smooth mechanics, but when he finally released the baseball, it was different than anyone else. And he could show you, hey, this is how I throw it. I can say, hey, this is how I grip my slider, and it's just going to come out differently. You look at a lot of guys around the major leagues that have really good sliders, like this Adam Ottavino. He's got a really
sure.
good slider. It might be similar to what I threw, but it's different because each of us have different release points, and that's the one that mechanic wise and what you do on the rubber is fine, but once you release the ball, then that's what is different. And they do have these pitching labs that try to show you the different feel. It's almost overthinking in a way when you're trying to feel it
Right.
come off your fingertips, and this is how you want it to come off your fingertips. And I guess some guys are really really aware of that. I've talked to some guys on the Yankees and they're like really aware of, hey, I can feel it coming off of my fingertips. And I'm like, well, I can feel it. I get underneath the ball and hang it, but I don't feel it coming off of my fingertips. So it is different in the way they teach things, but it's just all in a release point that everybody's different. Nothing. I don't think anyone has the same release point when they throw a pitch.
Sure. And you're a taller guy too. So guys I've spoken to that have actually tried to hit off of you said, I mean, you look like you're right on top of them. You, Randy Johnson, guys that are, on the tall side, that, I mean, that's got to help too, because you're throwing it a little closer to the plate and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it just drops off, man. I mean, that's once you discovered that pitch, that had to be like, all right, all right.
Yeah, it really helps. I mean, especially to a righty. And I stood on the third base side of the rubber, and
Yeah.
I'm 6'6", Randy 6, Johnson 6'10", and our stride rate was not any, it wasn't tremendously long. I mean, we're striding, normal to our height. You look at David Robertson, he was a Yankee, and now he's been around.
Sure.
Now he's with Texas. He had one of the longest stride rates, and that helps him. Now he's a guy that's probably 5'9", 5'10".
Yeah, he's about my size.
So you look
Yeah.
at smaller pitchers. He's really trying to stride a long distance, and it worked for him. Some organizations teach, hey, we want you to stride longer, and that way you're cutting off and getting to the plate and getting on top of the hitter a bit longer. Some guys are more comfortable with that because smaller pitchers, they have to create their own downward angle. That's how you want it. I mean, you want it to feel like it's coming at a downward angle instead of coming out straight. Easier for a taller pitcher, harder for a smaller pitcher. So they're trying to create a longer stride. But yeah, it definitely helps if you're taller. I mean, you got the slope of the mound, and you're probably 8 feet tall by the time you get on top of the rubber if you're 6'5" or over.
That's a hell of a good point. I mean, and actually, you brought up David Robertson. That also makes me think of Tim Lincecum a little bit, because he was,
Yes.
another
Same way,
shorter
yes.
guy. And,
Look how far he strided. Yeah.
yeah, and he was obviously very successful with it. So I know it's not a one size fits all thing, and that's something else I kind of wanted to ask. Do you think that some of the and I'm not one of those guys that's gonna poop all over any new school stuff. I have an open mind. But do you think that maybe they're trying to push almost a one size fits all approach to some of these pitchers now?
I think in some occasion, yes. I think for analytics and all the pitching and all the technology that they have, it's definitely room for it. And anything that you can learn about what you're doing on the mound or how you feel as a pitcher and trying to. I always, I like the fact that if they're trying to teach, be aware of what you do wrong and what you do right instead of somebody always telling you, hey, you always need help. But if you can fix yourself on the mound after you throw a couple bad pitches, if that's what they're trying to get to, then, perfect, because you want that. You want a pitcher to feel, okay, I just threw 2 balls. What do I have to do to try to get back into the count or get dialed back in the strike zone? So you want that. Sometimes I think they overthink things, and I think they try to throw too much at some of these players, and it just confuses them instead of, reading swings or stop, not be so much of a robot like they're trying to teach now. These are athletes, and let them do their thing instead of, trying to teach them like a robot, because a lot of these guys, they're not. I mean, nobody's a robot, but at the same time, let their talent, let their instincts take control, and they're trying to take the instincts away.
Yeah, so it's almost information overload at that point.
Yes, on a lot of occasions, yeah.
One of my favorite lines is, I think, what was it, Bull Durham, where it's just don't think. And if you have to be out there thinking nonstop, how can that be good for you? How can that be good for a pitcher? If you have the natural ability to do it. Yeah, of course you might need a pitching coach to come out and calm you down, tell you a joke, whatever.
What is it they say? Well, keep it simple, stupid, or something like whatever that is. Keep it
exactly. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, and it is. Don't overthink things, but I mean, you obviously have to think as an athlete about what guys are trying to do to you, but. at the same time, don't overthink. And I think sometimes these guys overthink things instead of hey, look at what's going on, instead of I got to go back to the card, or I got to what am I supposed to throw here? It says in this count, this is what I'm supposed to throw. Well, how about what the hitter just, the swing that he just showed you, or the take that he just showed you? So that stuff's lost.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I wanted to bring up. I mean, isn't the hitter going to dictate what you're pitching? A script can't do that.
Oh,
You got to know
absolutely.
what the hitter has that day. I mean, what he's looking for,
Yeah.
right? Or am I crazy?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to come up with a game plan on how to get someone out, and the hitter's going to tell you how to change if you need to change. If you look at a starter, yeah, you're going to face maybe. Well, now it's always the third time around the lineup. I mean, that could be another whole show, but you can't good hitters. You can't get them out the same way all the time. I always when I talk with it and play with Edgar Martinez or Ken Griffey Jr., those guys, even Cal Ripken Jr., I would listen to these guys talk, and they were like, okay, if he got me out with a breaking ball, well, I'm going to look for that the next time, and I'm going to sit on it because he thinks that I can't hit it, and he's going to hang one, and then I'm going to get to it. It's like Cal Ripken Jr. was saying, okay, if he gets a hit off a starter, he gets a hit off their slider. Every time that he's gotten a hit off a pitch, they take that away from that pitcher because they feel like they don't have any confidence to come back with that pitch to try to get him out. So he goes, okay, I just took away his breaking or his slider. Now I'm going to
Wow.
look for the other two pitches. And if I hit one of those, then I'm going to look for the third one because he's not throwing either one of those first two. And he goes, that's just the way that these guys think and the starters think. And, it's you always come up with a game plan, but it always changes. And most of the time the hitter tells you when you need to change.
And that's got to be invaluable information to get from a hitter of that caliber. I mean, as a pitcher, that's got
Right,
to be,
exactly.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and you even doubling up inside. I remember facing Manny Ramirez, and they would always say, okay, throw him inside, but don't double up in there because, and I believe that with a lot of good hitters is if you throw them inside, you back them off, or you throw a good pitch inside, don't come back in because you've already made them aware of that inside pitch, and if you come right back in the next pitch, they're going to rope you down the line, and it usually always happens. It's like that's a setup pitch, set up for something away because that's where you want to get guys out most of the time, and you learn. I mean, a lot of the hitters will if you talk to them, they'll tell you exactly how to get them out. Sometimes hitters get too much credit.
I believe that. You did bring up, some of these guys being some of these pitchers now they're kind of trying to make it a little robotic, and that's why I love a guy like Nestor Cortez because he'll screw with guys' heads with timing and that hesitation and everything, and he'll be back this year. So I was wondering if today, just before you came on, Jim Bowden from the Athletic said Snell will wind up with the Yankees. Now I don't know if that's true. I take all that with a grain of salt. It's behind Cole, you have Rodon, now Stroman, hopefully Nestor for a full year, and I guess Clark Schmidt. So I'm just
Right.
curious as to what your thoughts are on the rotation. Do they need to add another guy? Is this good enough? What do you think you're going to see? I think Rodon is actually going to be a huge piece if he gets back to form. But
Yeah, he's the guy that didn't start the season healthy, and you wonder, and he could be that type that he just felt okay after signing the big contract. He wasn't healthy, and he tried to give the Yankees anything he could, and it didn't turn out well. Hopefully, he comes in and he stays healthy, and he can be that solid number two behind Cole. Cole's the guy you don't have to worry about. I mean, he had a Cy Young year last year, and hopefully that doesn't go to waste. Rodon's a big, I won't say question mark, but obviously after he did what he pitched like last year, he's got to figure that, okay, you have a lot to prove. Yeah, Marcus Stroman, he had a great first half last year, but injuries have plagued him. Mentally in New York, you wonder, he's a big guy in social media as far as expressing his feelings, and New York's probably not the place to be doing that. And hopefully, nobody's going to be perfect, whether you're on the road or at home. And hopefully, if he has a bad outing at home, that's not the snowball effect of things going wrong with him. He's got a great attitude. He's a great pitcher.
Yeah.
and he can really add to that rotation. And they desperately needed someone like that. He's a guy that's just not a 5 inning guy. He can actually go deep into the game, and they need that as well. So I hope that really works out. The last two guys, in Nestor Cortez and Clark Smith. Cortez was hurt last year. Like you mentioned, he's a guy that mixes it up. He had a really good year when you could shift. Once the shifts weren't there, I thought that may have affected him a little bit more, as far as sometimes when you make mistakes over the plate, it's an out when you can shift. Well, if you make mistakes over the plate and there's no shifts, when they banned them last year, they're base hits now. So a lot of times it affected some pitchers around the league, and I felt that he was one of them. So hopefully he can go out. I'd love to see more hesitation. You always need to mess up the rhythm of the hitters, and he can do that with that. And Clark Schmidt, is you just look for improvement. He's a great kid. I think he needed to develop a changeup. Everything was away to righties and into lefties, nothing breaking the other way. He really didn't have a two-seam fastball. He didn't have a good changeup. He never threw it. It was all cutter, slider,
Yep.
and fastballs in. So, it's all about these guys taking the next step and improving. I've known Blake Snell for years, ever since he was a little kid, because his dad and I played minor league baseball together.
Oh, wow.
And he's a very good pitcher, but even Carlos Rodon, on occasion he'll go deep in the game, but these guys are 5 inning pitchers sometimes. And I think Blake Snell's another one of those guys that his pitch count gets up there so high that 5 innings, the next thing you know, you're going to the bullpen. So I don't know how much they need him. Obviously, he's a quality guy. I think it's a matter of, will the Yankees want to pay what he's asking? So I think that's a big sticking point. I mean, you hear the Angels, you hear some West Coast teams, so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the Yankees are always been involved in everyone. Their name is always involved with everyone. As far as him coming here, that I don't know.
One thing we've seen with the Yankees rotation, in my mind, is, these guys are tired by September. They do need guys to go deeper into games. So that's
and it's all they do. And again, things change so much as far as how they work out. They don't run as much as they used we
Yep.
did. I think that goes into a lot of the third time around the lineup. They get tired. Their arm gets tired. Well, their legs are the first to go. So once that goes, then everything else goes. But with Rodon and Snell, and some of these guys, it's just their pitch count gets up so high. And now with the 100 and 110 pitches, you're going to the bullpen right away. And you would like to see them maybe be more efficient, like Rodon, be a little bit more efficient and be able to give you 6 and 7 innings every time. I mean, he's definitely able to do that. He's a really good pitcher. So, he's going to be somebody to watch. Clark Schmidt, Nestor Cortez, the whole rotation. Cole's the only guy, obviously, you don't have to worry about, but everybody else in the rotation, you're going to have to be, it's going to be, hey, let's see what they can do. Because pitching, the offense, I think they've taken care of that. I think offensively, as long as guys stay healthy, they're going to be great. Pitching is always going to be the key, and with the Yankees, their pitching is the one that makes or breaks them.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. You mentioned Rodon, and I agree. I don't think he was healthy at all last season. I just think I think he's too good of a pitcher just from his body of work. But I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, my first time at Kauffman Stadium was last year. I think it was game 161, where he gave up 10 without getting an out. And
oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess I could thank him for letting me walk around the stadium and get the tour of everything after he gave up 10. But I don't think he's that. I think he's going to come back. He looks like he's in a little bit better of shape.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And guys, you don't see too many guys play injured anymore, but he could have been one of those guys that say, hey, you know what? You signed me to a big contract. I'm going to have to give you everything I have. And, I'm still feeling whatever kind of injury that he had. And the thing of it is that there's no pat on the back from the media and the fans when you're going out there hurt, and I'm sure he knew that. So,
yeah,
and I'm sure, and he's that type of player that says, you know what, I'm going to play hurt and I'm going to take my medicine because I'm not fully healthy. And you hope that he is fully healthy this year, because he's huge behind Cole if he can do that. And then having Stroman, that's a good 1-2-3 punch if that works out.
Really is, and that would be good in October for sure. So
yes.
before we get to the end of this thing, our mutual friend Chris Sheeran keeps telling me to ask you about this one particular story. Evidently, and this is all I know, he wouldn't tell me anything. You didn't tell me anything. Apparently, 1998, something about a bus trip with the Yankees in Mexico. I know nothing more about it than that. So the floor is yours. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, in '98 at the end of spring training, we were going out to California and we were going to play two exhibition games. And I think one of them was against San Diego State. Maybe we were having two games against them. I don't remember, but I know we were going to San Diego State, and we were flying this plane. It was called Icelandic Air, and it was a European Airlines. And for some reason, they couldn't land in two U.S. states, so it landed in Tampa because they were picking us up, and they couldn't re-land in a U.S. state, so they had to land in another country. So since we were going to San Diego, we're just going to land in Tijuana.
Oh boy.
And we would just bust to San Diego. And so we land in Tijuana, we get on the bus and we go around, and the Jersey barriers that divide highways. Yeah. Well, they had these Jersey barriers in the cement, and they were lined the exit ramp wherever we were going to go towards the US border. And it was these Jersey barriers slowly went from maybe a couple inches all the way up to, what are they, like 3 feet. So it had a gradual incline. Well, for some reason, the first bus, we had two buses. The first bus made it through, went on the exit, and they were headed towards the border. Our bus was just a player's bus. This bus caught the Jersey barrier, and one side of the wheels started, and this guy kept driving up the Jersey barrier. So as we were getting to the top of the 3 feet, the bus was looking like it was tipping over.
Oh.
And I had David Wells that was sitting directly across from me. And next thing you know, he's way up high. All this luggage and all this stuff from the overthing started coming down. And I don't know how the bus driver drove off of this Jersey barrier. We were both wheels, the whole bus was half on and half on the ground. And all of a sudden he drove off of it, and everything goes. Some of the players on the other side were falling to the other side of the bus where the wheels were on the ground. All of a sudden the bus stopped. We're sitting there yelling at the busie. We get out. We're probably 100 yards from the border. We get out, and the whole 1998 Yankees are walking towards the border. We're walking. We got off the bus. We walked towards the border. Now, Brian Cashman was our GM then, and he was on that trip. Now, Mr. Steinbrenner was still alive back then, and for some reason, Brian Cashman made sure, he says, George Steinbrenner cannot find out about this. If he finds out about this, I'm going to be fired. And for some reason, he never found out about it. And we crossed the border, and nobody was hurt, so it was funny. Nobody printed in the paper because we had the media. They were on the first bus. And, we played our exhibition game. We started in the Anaheim. And remember, that year we started 0-4. And all of a sudden, after 97, losing in the playoffs, the next thing you know, that in the papers, is it time for the Yankees to make a managerial change? And it was like, my gosh. And then we won our first game in Oakland. Next thing you know, we won 125 games and set a record. So it was definitely an interesting way to start. But I can remember that bus driver driving up the Jersey barrier. The thing of it was him driving up and how he drove off of it. I don't know how he drove off of the barrier. He never backed up. He just kept going straight. And I was like, it was like you were on a monorail. Like, what are we doing here? So Derek Jeter, you name it, Mariano, Pettit, Pisami, we had you name them. We were all on the same bus.
I think the fact that Wells might have fallen on you would be kind of the most terrifying part to me.
Exactly. I mean, we were already trying to block luggage and stuff from coming down and people's bags, and I'm looking and I see Boomer across from me. I'm like, okay, you got me by about 50 pounds, and this isn't going to go well.
So you crossed the border on foot, or did the driver actually?
Yeah, we all walked across the border, and the same bus drove up, and then we all got back on it because it wound up being all right. But we walked to the border.
That must have been something. Here come the '98 Yankees on foot crossing the border from Tijuana.
Yeah. And I'm sure whoever was at the border patrol or whatever, they were like, "What the heck is this?"
That's great, man. That's great. Well, we are almost up against it, so I'm going to start the pitch clock on you. We do a little rapid fire thing here at the end, and started as a goof. Now people seem to enjoy it, but I'm going to ask you in just 5 random major league cities, your favorite post-game meal, whether it's a spread or you go out to a restaurant. You don't need to name the restaurant so nobody comes bothering you or anything, but your favorite post-game meal in these 5 cities. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Miami.
Ooh, I would have to say some Cuban sandwiches have got to be good.
Ooh, good one. Okay, how about Seattle?
Seattle salmon and Copper River salmon. We had a friend of mine that would cook salmon in the clubhouse. He was our team chef back then. And that's before we even had them. Copper River salmon, absolutely.
That didn't stink up the clubhouse?
No, it was amazing the way he made them. They were great because you could only get them a certain time of year.
Okay, so moving on. Cleveland. This is a weird one I've never asked.
Ooh, and that was probably the worst spread in all of baseball.
Really? No kidding, really?
Oh, it was awful back then. I would say anything outside the stadium,
wow.
A steak outside the stadium. Nobody ate in that clubhouse.
Oh my God, it was that bad. What the hell would they give you?
It wasn't good back then, and we always would tell them, and they just never learned.
Oh, okay.
Maybe the best thing is this one of the clubhouse kids' mom made banana bread, so we'll just say the banana bread.
Wow. Okay, that's a good one. Then maybe it's a good reason I never asked that one. Okay, how about Boston of all places?
Ooh, Boston. I would probably have to say, every once in a while we get some lobster rolls up in Boston. They were pretty good at the end of the game. They actually had some really good chicken fingers that I don't know where they got them, but they were like these hot buffalo chicken fingers in the clubhouse, and they were great.
You're the second person to talk about the chicken fingers in the Boston locker room, so they must have been good.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a holdover from Boggs being over there with all the fried chicken or what, but apparently they were delicious.
Yeah, I don't know, and they were lightly breaded, so they weren't like the real heavy breaded chicken fingers. They were like lightly breaded and more chicken than anything.
Well, now the last one, and everybody gives me the same answer to this, so I want to see if you do as well. Atlanta.
I mean, you're going to places that I didn't go to very often. Atlanta. I think the only thing I can remember that they had was like maybe burgers or something. I don't remember anything else in that place. What did everybody else say?
Chicken, for some reason. Apparently they had great fried chicken too. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they didn't hook you guys up because you were beating them up in the World Series. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember what we had in the World Series, and then we would go there during interleague, and I think we've only went there a few times, but I don't even remember there.
Okay, well that's fair. So I'm glad I got a different answer for Atlanta at least, but that's 2 for the chicken in Boston. So that's so I'm starting to see a trend on these. So I'm doing my own research. That's all. Well, we are definitely up against it, and I don't want to keep you here all day. I'm sure you have snow to go look at.
Shovel.
But I want to thank Jeff Nelson for coming on today. Jeff, thank you so much. That was a good time.
My pleasure, Chris.
Enjoy the snow. Hopefully you don't have to shovel too much. I'm Chris Vitali. That's Jeff Nelson. And we will catch you next time here on Totally Baseless.